Hello students. So today we are going to start with the topic of voluntary and involuntary actions. What is a voluntary action? Voluntary actions are basically that are non-automatic, which are without any awareness. They are supposed to happen. They with awareness. Voluntary is basically comes from the term volunteer, where volunteer means where you do anything willingly with your own consent, and involuntary is without awareness. So in this, the type of response is non-automatic, involuntary, and automatic and involuntary. Part of the brain that controls action in voluntary action is cerebrum, and part of the brain that controls action in involuntary action is medulla oblongata. Speed involuntary is very slow, speed in involuntary is fast. What is the nervous pathway for voluntary action? From receptor passes to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord to the cerebrum, and the cerebrum to the spinal cord, and then the effector. And in involuntary, receptor to the spinal cord, and then the medulla oblongata, and then the spinal cord, and then the effector. As we have discussed earlier, the earlier points, that the part of the brain that controls these actions involuntary, it controls the cerebrum controls it, and in involuntary, medulla oblongata controls it. Examples are speaking, walking, and writing. That are voluntary action that you do by your own wish. Involuntary action is heartbeat, respiration, and peristalsis. So these are involuntary. These are automatic. These are bound to happen. Reflex action. Reflex action is an automatic and rapid response to a stimulus. Reflex action is any response to a stimulus. It's a automatic response to any stimulus, any action or anything, like basically when you touch something hot, immediately your reflex action suggests that, gives you instructions that you need to remove your finger or remove your hand from that hot object. So that is a reflex action. So how does it happens is, stimulus passes to the receptor, that is the sense organ, and sense organ passes it to the sensory neurons to the spinal cord, and then it to the motor neurons, and then the effector muscles or the glands, and then a response is generated. So this is a reflex action example. So there is a stimuli detected by finger. So sensory neuron says it to the spinal cord, and the motor neuron and the effector, and you jump. What is a reflex arc? Reflex arc is a pathway along which nerve impulse travels during reflex action. So it is the pathway through which the nerve impulse passes during a reflex action. So stimulus, then the receptors, then the sensory neurons, then the spinal cord, and the relay neurons, then the effectors, and the response. So I told you this is the reflex arc, like you are touching something hot here. And then how it passes? It passes from the receptors, then the sensory neuron, then the spinal cord, then the spinal cord passes to the relay neurons passes it to the motor neurons, and then to the response. You give a response. So what is the differences between voluntary and involuntary? Voluntary action, voluntary, involuntary, and reflex action. Voluntary action is basically non-automatic. Involuntary actions are completely automatic, which do not need thinking and performed unknowingly. Reflex actions are rapid response or rapid automatic response to a stimulus. Voluntary action is basically controlled by the brain, that is part of the brain, that is cerebrum. Involuntary action is controlled by medulla oblongata, and reflex action is controlled by spinal cord. A voluntary action, the response is very slow. Involuntary action, the response is fast. And reflex action, the response is sudden and fast. We have got examples here. So in the next class, we'll start how nervous tissues cause muscular movements.